Here, I'll say one thing about every game in Action 52. Fire Breather. Fire Breather is a difficult platformer where you control a small dinosaur that can shoot fire. Star Evil. This is a vertical shooter with a glitch that can render it actually unbeatable. Illuminator is a puzzle game where you light up a path for a character to follow. G-Force Fighters, another vertical shooter notable for a glitch that allows the player to become invincible. Ooze, a game that was famously part of a contest but was impossible to beat due to a bug. Silver Sword, a fantasy-themed platformer that's poorly designed and actually filled with bugs. Critical Bypass. This is a top-down shooter that is essentially unplayable due to its slow controls. Jupiter Scope, a basic shooter with enemies that move in unpredictable patterns. Alfredo, a strange platformer featuring a character in a chef's hat. Operation Full Moon, a top-down shooter that is no different than the rest, but it appears that you simply walk through a grassy area, shooting the objects on the green squares. You do this for 8 levels, then it crashes actually, or goes back to level 1. Dam Busters, a platformer where you control a character that looks like a construction worker. Thrusters, a shooter that is a shooter that is a clone of a few other games on the cartridge is sort of given. So it's called Thrusters. This is the 12th, and it's basically another shooter in Action 52. Haunted Hill is a side-scrolling platformer with a spooky theme. Chill Out is a platformer on ice that features extremely frustrating and actually slippery controls. Sharks is a game where you control a diver and you have to avoid sharks. Megalonia is a game where a shooter with confusing level layouts and a boss that cannot be defeated. French Baker. The player controls a French baker in what is presumably their kitchen with the goal to destroy as many enemies as possible. Atmos Quake, a shooter with uninspired level design and simple enemy patterns. Mayong, this is one of the few puzzle games on the cartridge of Action 52. Space Dreams, a shooter that features psychedelic backgrounds actually. Streamers, this is a game where you must swing from ropes to get to the end of the stage. Spreadfire, a shooter with a unique weapon upgrade that changes your firing pattern. Bubblegum Rossi, this is a game that is almost unplayable due to a glitch with the controls. Micro Mike, a simple platformer with confusing level layouts. Underground is a game set in a cave that is similar to other platformers on the cartridge. Rocket Jockey is actually a horizontal shooter with a slow-moving ship. Non-human, game 27, you play as a certain creature. You have to level and jump over projectiles and over other voids. There is only one level in the game, and after passing it, it is repeated. Crybaby is actually a simple platformer that lacks music or sound. Slashers is a platformer with a ninja character and bad collision detection. Crazy Shuffle is a bizarre platformer where a dancing man must avoid falling objects. Fuzz Power is a platformer that is basically a reskinned version of another game on the cartridge. Shooting Gallery, a game where you shoot targets in a gallery setting. 33 Lollipops, a vertical shooter with a very strange and colorful theme. Evil Empire is the next game. It is set in the Middle East on account of the minarets or Arab towers that are to be found at the top of the screen amid a purple background. It is not clear what the Evil Empire the game designer was referring to, but it's probably Persia. Sombreros, a game that's similar to Space War but with hats instead of spaceships. Storm Over the Desert, a shooter with a confusing and difficult to play control scheme. Mashman Mash Man consists of 3 levels. All 3 levels look similar in that they take place at night in a land with many odd-shaped colored blocks. They Came, the 38th game on the cartridge, They Came is a vertical shooter that is nearly identical to other games in the collection. Laser League now is 39, is a platformer with a character who shoots a laser. Billy Bob. Billy Bob is a platformer that is impossible to complete because the game crashes after beating all the levels. City of Doom. City of Doom is a shooter that features a city backdrop. Bits and Pieces, a platformer with broken controls. Beeps and Blips. Beeps and Blips, you take control of a ship and you need to kill a certain amount of ships to progress, and the game has 8 levels. Manchester is a side-scrolling shooter with extremely low-quality graphics. The Boss game, just called Boss simply, is a simple platformer that feels more like a tech demo. Dead Ant, the 46th game, you're a pink ant who has to kill other ants. And you don't want to get hit by a spider in the other levels. Hambo's Adventure, a side-scrolling shooter with a pig as the main character. 48 is Time Warp Tickers, which is a bizarre game where you control walking fingers through a psychedelic landscape. Jigsaw is 49, is a platformer featuring a construction worker, despite the manual's misleading description. Ninja Assault is a side-scrolling platformer with a ninja theme and pretty terrible controls. Robbie Robot, second to last game, 51, is a platformer that is a direct copy of a game on another unlicensed cartridge. And then lastly, you have The Cheetah Men. This is the flagship title, which is a buggy platformer that was actually meant to rival the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles franchise.